Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're jumping right into week 6 of BTM 440 to figure out exactly how technical security testing actually integrates with formal IT auditing. If you've ever wondered how the bits and bytes of network security connect to boardroom decisions and corporate governance, well, you are definitely in the right place. Let's get into it. So let's start with a really crucial question, one that literally plagues so many organizations. How do we take raw, deeply technical data, like a massive list of network vulnerabilities, and turn it into actionable, formal security audits that management can actually use? It is a huge leap from just finding an open port to certifying that an organization's overall risk is properly managed. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, the IT audit universe. Second, CAATTs and data analytics. Third, vulnerability scanning essentials. Fourth, the penetration testing lifecycle. And finally, fifth, continuous monitoring and auditing. Okay, section 1, the IT audit universe, laying the governance foundation. Before an auditor even thinks about looking at a server, there has to be a solid foundation. An IT audit relies heavily on senior management to integrate and institutionalize good IT practices. In fact, if an organization lacks basic IT governance, honestly, an auditor shouldn't even attempt an in-depth network audit. You absolutely need frameworks, two of the most common being COBIT and the ISO 27000 series. Without them, you just have no standard to audit against, because these frameworks actually define the organization's risk profile. Internal auditors structure their work using one of 3 main approaches to make sure they've got enough knowledge of key IT risks. The vertical approach looks specifically at application controls. These are the embedded controls preventing or detecting errors in a single application's input, processing, and output. Then you've got the deep vertical approach, which takes a highly specialized deep dive into one complex area. Meanwhile, a horizontal approach takes a broad look at a specific function or control across multiple systems or even geographic locations. Moving on to Section 2, CAATTs and Data Analytics, the Auditor's Toolkit. Enter CAATs, or Computer-Assisted Audit Techniques. You can basically think of CAATTs as the modern digital detective's magnifying glass. It represents a really broad category covering any use of technology to assist in an audit. This can be anything from using basic Excel queries all the way up to deploying highly customized, generalized audit software. The core idea here is gaining direct access to electronic information to gather highly reliable evidence. So why do we use them? Well, modern audits involve a staggering amount of data. CAATTs allow for the manipulation of massive data records with almost no significant added costs. By automating the routine stuff, auditors can stop wasting time on manual verification. No more ticking and tying manually. Instead, they get to spend their time analyzing complex relationships within the data to uncover things like fraud or compliance failures. It's a real game changer. Modern auditing is undergoing this massive shift across the innovative technology spectrum. While a lot of auditors are still relying heavily on traditional spreadsheets, we are rapidly moving toward advanced data platforms. We're talking about tools capable of utilizing natural language processing, machine learning, and cloud services for real-time analysis across entirely diverse technologies. All right, Section 3, Vulnerability Scanning Essentials, Finding the Weaknesses. Vulnerability scanning is the formal process of observing technological weaknesses in an information system. And look, automated scanners are fantastic. They're simple, they're fairly reliable, they're incredibly fast and very thorough, but they come with a massive explicit warning. Do not trust their outputs blindly. If a scanner finds a vulnerability, you absolutely must manually verify it to rule out false positives. When we deploy these scanners, we generally have to choose between active and passive methods. Interestingly, recent research, specifically a 2021 study by ASIC, indicates that passive vulnerability detection is actually a total game changer. The tests show that passive detection isn't just more accurate and precise than active scanning, but it's also faster and, crucially, it doesn't disrupt network operations at all. So the absolutely critical point here is that vulnerability management is a continuous business process, not just some IT chore. A raw list of 1,000 unverified vulnerabilities, that is practically useless to a business leader. It only gains value when it's shaped into a decision support product, meaning it tells management what matters, why it matters, the likely business impact, and exactly who owns the remediation. Now, it's really important to differentiate scanning from our next topic, penetration testing. To put it simply, think of vulnerability scanners as providing breadth and consistency. It's like a detective walking around the perimeter of a building, pointing out all the unlocked windows. Penetration testing, however, provides depth and realism. It is the simulated burglar who actually climbs through that open window to prove it can be exploited and to see exactly what they can steal once they're inside. Which brings us to Section 4, Penetration Testing Lifecycle, Simulating the Adversary. A penetration test is a controlled, authorized simulation that builds a highly structured attack. It always begins with reconnaissance, gathering open-source public intelligence. Then, network mapping to see exactly what's running. Next up is vulnerability testing to find the weak spots, followed by the actual penetration testing, where the attack is carried out. But don't forget the final, most important phase, mitigation activities. Finding the flaw is really only half the job. Actually fixing it is the ultimate goal. Depending on the scope authorized by senior management, testers are going to use one of three main approaches. A black box test simulates an outside attacker with zero internal knowledge. A white box test simulates an insider threat, or an attacker who has already fully breached the system and knows everything. And gray box? Well, that sits right in the middle. Getting explicit authorization from management before these tests begin is completely critical to define boundaries and prevent any legal risks. Remember, the goal of a penetration test is not just to hack the system to show off your skills. The report is not just some mere formality. It is the primary deliverable. It translates the thrill of the hack into a highly practical remediation blueprint. This is what complements existing controls and actually allows management to make informed risk decisions. Finally, Section 5, Continuous Monitoring and Auditing, the Operational Cycle. It is absolutely vital to separate these two concepts. Continuous monitoring is a management function. It's management automatically checking the daily operations and transactions to make sure their own policies are working. Continuous auditing, on the other hand, is an independent function performed by auditors. It essentially acts as a meta-control, constantly evaluating whether management's monitoring is actually adequate and effective in the first place. When you're setting up a continuous audit plan, every procedure falls into one of four key objectives: detective, preventative, financial, or compliance. And what makes continuous auditing so incredibly powerful is its dynamic nature. An auditor can reconfigure these on the fly. For instance, if an area historically had really high compliance failures, you might deploy a super strict preventative control. But once compliance improves, you can dynamically downshift that into a simple detective control to save time and resources. At the very heart of a mature cybersecurity program is the security cycle. It flows naturally from secure to monitor to audit and then to improve. It perfectly mirrors the classic plan, do, check, act logic. In the check phase, you audit using highly objective indicators. In the act phase, you correct and improve. Ultimately, it creates an organizational habit of adapting to new threats rather than constantly improvising when things go wrong. Remember this core rule. Operational cybersecurity is literally never done. The threat landscape, new systems, new vendors, and business priorities, they constantly shift. This creates what we call vulnerability churn, where the set of high-priority risks literally changes day by day. Therefore, an organization's exposure has to be continuously managed, measured, and systematically reduced. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought to consider for your own environments. Are your security assessments just static, one-time events, or are they integrated into a continuous, truly dynamic audit cycle that adapts exactly as fast as the attackers do? Thank you so much for joining me today, and hey, keep questioning your controls.